Hi everyone! The next video is an information gathering from the articles Controversies in Applied Linguistics by Barbara Seidelhofer, which was provided for the teacher, and the research Non-Native English Language Teachers' Perspective on Culture in English as a Foreign Language Classrooms by Josephine Boyard. First, we're going to explain them briefly. Then, we have selected a theme that both articles share to provide a critique as a sequence. And finally, we're going to apply the theme to our context as Chilean students of English language teaching program. To begin with, Controversies in Applied Linguistics turns around the notion of linguistic imperialism and starts with an explanation of how Robert Phillipson's book was read at an American university by the participants in a graduate seminar led by Margie Burns. Mainly from the point of view of its political implications, the focus of attention here is on the mode of argumentation, rather than the issues themselves. In fact, this controversy puts in front the very process of critical evaluation and discussion, which this book seeks to encourage. The reading provoked intense discussion and debate not only of the issues of language dominance and spread that the author raised, but also of the rhetorical style and strategies that he chose to present the story of linguistic oppression. The participants identified problems with the author's claims, credibility, style, tone, terminology, and coverage. They also discovered that this book was an illustration of the use of narrative as an hegemonic tool. The notion of English as a tool of linguistic and cultural domination has gained attention in English language study in part due to the work of Robert Phillipson. In linguistic imperialism, his primary concern is language policy and planning in so-called third world countries, especially in Africa, and ways in which so-called first world countries have influenced educational development and English learning there through foreign policy. As language teachers and researchers, the participants were eager to learn about the ideology transmitted with, in, and through the English language, and the role of language specialists in the cultural export of English. Their interactions with Phillipson through the text and each other were enriched and vitalized by the diversity of their linguistic, cultural, and educational backgrounds, as well as their aspirations and academic interests. According to the seminar, one of Phillipson's major objectives was exposing the English language and ELT specialists as a source of socioeconomic underdevelopment in the so-called third world, whatever his motives were for what they perceived.
When referring to multiculturalism, we can't forget that English is considered a globalized language, which is equal to the language that people of other countries will use in order to communicate between each other. The main reasons for English to be a globalized language and a dominant language is because of political and economical power, as banks, publishers, and even the British Council were the main influencers of English becoming a globalized language. David Crystal referred to the globalization of English, but his main weakness was that he avoided to talk about the historical conflicts that had a huge influence in the evolution of English and its cultural impact. These two concepts were the results of the wars, the Americanization, and the British colonization, which led the colonists to impose their language to the American natives, which already had their own language. For communicational purposes, English has huge benefit opens doors, but it also closes doors and imposes cultural barriers. An example of this is when you translate something of its mother tongue to English. It will never have the same meaning. Therefore, English still had to pay.
During the last 2 decades, the world has become a global village, and English is becoming its lingua franca. In the article created by Yasemin Bayurt, it examined the importance of raising non-native English language teachers' awareness of different dimensions of culture in the teaching of English as an international language. The author gives us some definitions about culture, but it focuses on two. The first view supports the implementation of a culture-free curriculum for foreign language teaching, protecting the cultural integrity of non-native speakers. The second major view instead supports the idea that culture and language cannot be separated from one to another. Therefore, the presentation of the target language culture should be an essential part of the foreign language teaching curriculum. The second view is separated in two types of supporters. The first group claims that the culture of the foreign language should be involved in language teaching practice for a full understanding of the language forms that are presented to learners. The second group emphasizes the involvement of the learner's language in culture English as a foreign language classroom. Then, Yasemin Bayurt said that Kanagaraja points out that there are not enough center teachers to teach English all over the world, so periphery teachers are needed. Further, he elucidates that 80% of the English teachers in the world are non-native speakers of English, and these teachers are competent to teach English as a native speaker. Learners seem to be motivated to learn a foreign language when they had a successful non-native speaker model. Hence, it can be said that a successful non-native speaker model of a foreign language, English in our case, might help learners to overcome linguistic as well as cultural barriers in their language learning process. After that, the author briefly refers to the Turkish education system, which is fairly similar to the Chilean counterpart. At least in its primary education, both comprise 8 years of schooling, and in the Turkish education system, the students start learning a foreign language in 4th grade. In Chilean counterpart, although is mandatory from the 5th grade. Then she continues with a case study in Turkey with 12 non-native English-speaking teachers, and concludes that in this study the participant teachers showed an awareness of their importance as non-native English teachers in the field, and further indicated that native English-speaking teachers were also needed to help foreign language learners with pronunciation and communicating skills.
In this video, we rely on two papers, Controversies in Applied Linguistics and No-Native English Language Teachers' Perspective on Culture in English as a Foreign Language Classrooms. Controversies in Applied Linguistics react against linguistic imperialism, written by Robert Phillipson. In this process of intellectual exploration and development, the seminar came to value even more the need to hear and consider multiple voices and multiple views. Often problematizing the situation is sufficient for the writing observes. Goals to be met. The reader's consciousness is raised, and they are moved to act to improve conditions. On the other text points out that there are not enough central teachers to teach English all over the world, so peripheral teachers are needed. Further, it elucidates that 80% of the teachers English in the world are no-native speakers of English, and these teachers are as competent to teach English as native speakers. Learners seem to be more motivated to learn a foreign language when they had a successful no-native speaker model. For example, the no-native English teacher as a guidance. Hence, it can be said that a successful no-native speakers model of a foreign language, for example English in our case, might help learners to overcome linguistic as well as cultural barriers in the language learning process. Our critics. For us, it is essential to be able to emphasize with our cultures without prejudice for being different and thus take advantage of other language as a tool to be able to know them. We as people must be aware of multiculturalism, respect it, and let the same members of it tell us what it's like to be part of the cultures. On the other hand, we can see that English is a double-edged sword. Thanks to its hegemony, today we can say that it is a universal language. For example, in most cases, when two people speak different language, they are more likely to want to communicate in English. This language, like others, can open doors for us to get to know other cultures and points of view, at other time to close them through prejudice to the difference, at the same time causing much damage. A clear example is the colonization of the USA. The British culture ended up with almost all the indigenous cultures that were in the new country. Application to our context. Chile, as a Spanish colony, belongs to the countries which deal with the issue of personal choice provided, although only a few of our population can actually accomplish an accurate performance of the language. Because of suitable education, politics to overcome these issues have been discarded since the dictatorship. Its primary aim was to deny access to higher education for the most of the population, by means of keeping it illiterate, also according with the oppressive management of the information that could enter from the 70s and on.